All right, guys, so let's talk about a quick tutorial you can learn pretty easily in Maya about cloth. So let's start with what we're going to make our cloth from. Makes sense for it to be made from something thin and pliable like plane. So what we're going to do here is enlarge this plane a bit. And I'm going to, let's change the subdivisions here to, I don't know, something like 40 or 50. I'm going to do 40. Oops, that would really slow down my computer. 1040. So here we go, 40. And I'm going to, oops, put it on that. And let's rotate this guy. Good. Let's make it here. I've got a plane. I'm going to resize this and make it appear to be something like a flag, right? So there we go. A rectangular shape. And that'll work. All right, so what I need to do is make this into a material like a cloth. So with this selected, I'm going to go up here to my workspace tab and, well, it's actually not my workspace tab, but my mode, I guess you would call it tab. I'm in animation mode. I want to get into effects. And I'm going to go up here to nCloth. And I'm going to create nCloth. So there we have. It's created. Okay, and what that does, it creates what's shown here as a little nucleus. And see that nucleus here has different settings of its own, and nCloth actual dynamic properties as well, and actual geometry that we're working with. So it's a cloth, right? Now, what if I animated this cloth? Let's assign it something first. This cloth, we have different presets that we can assign to it. Airbag, beach ball, burlap, all of these different things. They all react differently as far as the gravity, the weight, the folds, all the different movements, bendiness, the stretchiness, they all have different ways of telling the object to act in a certain manner. So I'm going to go to one like silk, and I'm going to go to replace. And it tells you a quick note about silk and how it reacts in some of these settings here. I'm just going to close these down for now. Now let's go ahead and play it. And it drops right through the floor. Okay. So something interesting that you can do is give this nucleus some properties here. So if I select the nucleus, I can do it here or click on it here. Some windows pop up and I can tell it how to act. Close some of these down so it's not to be too confusing. And on one of these titled ground plane, I want the nucleus to act as a ground plane, which means it's going to have a collider effect on it. So I'm going to use this, and I'm not going to add any bounce or friction or anything like that to it. Just see what it does first. If you want to play around with these later, that's fun. That's fine because it can be fun to do. Now I'm going to go to play now. And notice how that silk now crumples up and folds over itself on the ground plane. Now notice it's still moving, and it moves even past my timeline because it's not done reacting to the physics of the silk hitting the ground. If you want to see more of that, then you can change your timeline to a certain number. I want to change it to 200 just for funsies. And you can also change the way that it plays back by right-clicking on your timeline, going to playback speed. And if it's set here, play every frame max real time, let's see what that does. Not much difference really. But now that it's playing, it's got more action. Silk is real slippery, so it's moving, it's fluid. And so I went ahead and stopped it. If you do real time, let's see what that does. Same kind of thing. Doesn't seem to have any effect. Some reactions may act a little funny or may be really slow. So what I'm going to do is keep it on play every frame free for now. And that's just going to basically be for just working with cloth. Other animations, I'll have it set to something else. So I've got that playing for me now, but let's say I don't want it to just hang or just fall onto the ground. I want there to be some sort of gravity force, sure, but I want it to be reactive to something. Let's say if it were hanging on a pole, I can model a simple cylinder pole here. But for time's sake, what I'm going to do here is right click and go to vertex mode. And I'm going to select a few of these vertexes over here. Drag click those three. Maybe a group in the middle here. I'm going to drag click those three. And maybe three at the bottom. There we go. And what I want to do is constrain these, almost like if it were a flag. You know how flags have connection points where it's connected to rope, which then connects it to the pole. I'm going to kind of simulate that action by taking these sets of points and constraining them. So what I'm going to do is go to end constraint and transform constraint. And so now you can see that there's a constraint added right here. Now let's see what happens when I play. Very interesting. So now it has floor, and it also has a constraint added here where it's hanging from those 9 points of that flag. I'm saying it's a flag, banner, whatever you want it to be. Okay, well, that's fun. But what if there's a breeze? What if there's something below in this flag? How can we show that? What I'm going to do is click on the object here, and let's look at let's go to the nucleus, and that's going to be like the control center for this object. What I'm going to do is go to gravity and wind. Gravity is at 9.8. That's where you want it to be. That is the actual physical force of gravity. And when you see these three fields, it means X, Y, Z, and this -1 means it's pulling it down to the -Y, which means gravity is pulling downward. Wind speed is set at 0. Wind direction is at 1 on the X plane. So it's going to be shifting towards me or away from me. We'll see what it looks like, and we'll adjust it as we need to. But this plane right here, you can see where the X plane is. And so when we apply the wind, we'll see which way it blows, and we'll adjust it to fit what we need. So wind speed, let's start off with the gentle breeze here with 10. That's a pretty solid breeze, actually. But let's see how that plays. Oh, it's turning to me. I like that breeze, actually. But I want to change the direction. I don't want to move everything around in my scene. So if I want to just change the direction of it, then I can do that. And I will change the wind direction rather than being on the X plane. Let's go to the Z. So I'm going to make this 0. And X, Y, Z, this is my 1. It's going to go there. And let's see how that reacts. Let's play that. So now it's going towards the Z, which is the 1, which is not what I really want. So let's go back into this and make it a -1. And we'll see how that goes. All right, so let's see how this plays out. Now you can see how it's really taking on a good breeze here. Affect the wind and the physics affecting that cloth. So I like that pretty good. So that's pretty simple. And if you don't like the way that looks, maybe you can change something like the presets for that object, change it to something else. Let's see, how would something like chainmail act? See, that's not going to have much effect. The wind's not going to really change that because it has a much denser physical properties than what the silk would. So let's see what kind of experiment and see what works best. T-shirt's a little bit heavier than what the silk was, so 10-mile-an-hour winds can affect that a little bit differently. So you can kind of play around with it and see what works best. I think this one worked out pretty good. And once you get into something like that, you can also get into the dynamic properties of that object. So you can play around with the rigidity of it, the deform resistance, the stretchiness of that fabric. So we can really stretch it out, make it much more rigid, or we can make it really stretchy. That looks pretty bad. That's actually not so bad. And it kind of exaggerates the wind. As I make it more rigid or less stress, more stress resistant, see how it starts to sit more upright. If I add less, you see how there's a little bit more play, a little bit more bend in it. So there's different ways that you can make it really bend resistant, which is bad for a flag. If I can make it kind of a loose, kind of a gustier wind, maybe it has less bend resistance there. Like the compression resistance and taking that down, it's much more flexible that way. So you can definitely have fun with this. For this assignment or for this tutorial, what I would encourage you to do is take this object and apply some materials to it even. You can get into rendering, adding something to it, do something more than just this. And in order to see that, what you'd have to do is create a light and move that light about. And you can take a rendered view, see how that looks. And what I would do here is create a nice little scene, model a pole here, apply a material or a banner of your choice to the flag, animate it, get some good actions showing here with the folds, and then do a nice rendered view of that. And that can be something that you post for this assignment or makeup assignment. So there is working with cloths, fabrics, ground planes, and some of the different presets and dynamic controls of this particular effect.